Prologue, the 12th of July 1906. Molly Hayden had tried to get home before the storm had started, but the phone call had held her up. She left her office at Hayden Oil and Enterprises, her family empire, having just sealed a new multi-million-pound deal. She felt like she was on top of the world. She couldn't wait to get home to tell her husband and daughter, Trevor and Lori, about the deal. The snow was really falling heavily and the night had engulfed the road in a black blanket. She was concentrating as hard as she could, but she was still thinking about the row she had just had with her brother. A lot of things had been said, but she just couldn't get over it. She hated driving in the snow, especially as she had recently just got a new car that she didn't really know. For luck, she held the keyring her husband had given her when she got the car. A rose gold letter M. She loved it because it was full of diamonds. She replayed the argument with her brother over and over again in her head. She wasn't paying attention to the road, otherwise she would have seen the car speeding behind her. She snapped back to the present when the car rammed her. The snow made it difficult to control the car. She swerved, hoping to hit a snowdrift and stop. But she didn't. She tried so hard to regain control, but it was too late. She only briefly saw the cliff edge, but she couldn't do anything about it. She tried to scream, but the fear stopped her. The car plummeted over the cliff, crashing on the rocks below and becoming engulfed with flames. That was the night that Molly Hayden disappeared. Chapter 1, August 2016. Trevor awoke in a cold sweat. It may have been 30 years, but every morning since he had woken up in the same way. He hadn't been there when his wife's car had gone off the road that night, but every night he dreamt it. He saw the accident, and some nights he felt he could almost stop it, but he never could. The anniversary was the worst. He dragged himself out of bed and walked the few short steps to the bathroom. He caught sight on himself in the mirror. He would admit himself that he looked a mess. Unshaven, bloodshot eyes, possibly from the drinking the night before, and a state of slightly silvering hair. He opened the medicine cabinet and moved the various bottles of tablets, antidepressants, painkillers, and heartburn remedy to find the mouthwash. Looking into his own eyes in the reflection in the mirror, he told himself the same thing. Keep it together. Today might be the day. She might come home. The wake of Molly's accident, which it was always refereed to, never death, Trevor was never able to cope. They never did find a body, so he lived in hope that one day she would walk through the front door of their family home. False hope, many called it. Even Molly's own brother, Mike, had given up hope long before. Give it up, Trev. She's gone, he would often tell him. But Trevor never listened. He never believed for a single second that Molly was dead. Their daughter, Lori, who was only 6 years old when her mother went missing, was brought up too in the hope that her mother would one day return. In the 30 years since the accident, Trevor couldn't move on. He had tried, but he just couldn't. He had once even attended a meeting to have her declared legally dead, but he couldn't go through with it. He couldn't hold down a relationship with any other woman. The longest was only 6 months, but Trevor would always feel like he was cheating. Instead, he focused his energy on Molly's business, Hayden Oil and Enterprises. After her accident, Mike took over as president and went from strength to strength, becoming one of the most wealthy oil men in the world. Every so often they would try and search for Molly, but Mike gave up years ago. Mike had a lot of guilt in the aftermath of the accident. He and Molly had fallen out over the family business. A lot of things were said, and Mike always felt it was too heartbreaking to even think about that. He would never be able to take back what he had said. Trevor was sure that the guilt still stayed with him, but he was a closed book. No one really knew what Mike was thinking. He was just so focused on making money and signing deals. Trevor, on the other hand, wore his heart on his sleeve. It didn't take much to set him off. Sometimes just seeing another couple walking down the street hand in hand would bring a tear to his eye. There was almost a jealousy there that they had something that he didn't have anymore, someone to love. He also felt bad that his daughter grew up without her mother. Lori had done so well. As she grew up, she learned to look after her father and take care of him during his dark days. There would certainly be a lot of them, but she did what she had to do. Lori had decided that she didn't want to be in the oil business and had worked tirelessly to study to be a doctor. Trevor had offered her the chance to fill her mother's shoes in the company, but she had turned it down, telling him, "She'll be back." Trevor took a deep breath in and rubbed his eyes. First thing in the morning was always the worst. It would get better as the day went on. Especially today. Today was going to be different. After much soul searching, Trevor had decided it was time to take the first step in moving on. He planning on retiring and selling his family house. It wasn't an easy decision, in fact it was almost forced upon him. The house was the place where all his memories of Molly were, but the home was falling to bits, and after 30 years he felt he wasn't getting any younger. He was 62 now, and Trevor knew that he had to at least take the step to find a new place of his own. He had the money to buy anywhere in the world, but he had stuck it out in the 2-bedroom semi-detached house for all those years. He had spoken it over with Lori and Mike in the months and weeks leading up to the final decision, and they were all behind him. In fact, it was something that they had been urging him to do ever since that night. Trevor was really ready to take a step back. He had made plans to travel, visit all the places he and Molly had once planned to, but they had never made it. Yes, he thought, this is the start of my swan song. Trevor had invited all of his close family, friends and business clients to the house for a party where he was going to announce his plans. There was one small detail that he planned to miss out from the party. No one needed to know that. Not yet anyway. That familiar pain was back. He took his painkillers and knocked them back with his morning tea. He opened the back door and looked out into the garden. He had tried to keep the garden in a good state, but it just hadn't happened. The only feature that remained was the tree he planted not long after Molly's accident. He never thought of it as a memorial, but more of a tree of hope. He used to tell Lori that, before this tree has grown into an adult, your mum will be home with us. I promise. He felt like he had broken his promise. Molly still wasn't home. Trevor thought about what happened that night. He would have accepted it if the police and detectives had ever found a body. But they hadn't. The final enquiry decided that Molly's body must have been thrown off the cliff and washed out to sea. There had a very slim chance that she had survived the crash, and there was no evidence to say that she had walked free. But something had never sat right with Trevor. He had thought it over time and time again. He had visited the crash sites many times with what felt like 100 different people, private investigators, journalists and detectives, but none of them could give him the answers he wanted. Over the years he had appeared on television programs about missing people, news broadcasts, and given interviews for books. At the time the story of Molly Hayden's disappearance was known worldwide, but no one had ever given a lead, and there had never been a single sighting, not even a false one. But Trevor hoped they hadn't found a body, so maybe she had escaped. Maybe she hadn't even been in the car and had been abducted or held for ransom, but he would have known about that by now. If he ever had a bad day, he would often find himself searching the case and reading various conspiracy theories. One such theory would say that Trevor himself had killed her. Others included she was taken and trained as a spy and was living in Russia. He would stop reading them pretty quickly because they upset him too much. He didn't need to know what a group of idiots on the internet thought about him or his family. Trevor always hoped more on the anniversary. He seemed to think that since it was the day, that there would be a chance that maybe someone, somewhere would tell him something. He often thought that Molly herself would walk through the door and explain where she had been. As he normally did, he found himself getting caught up in the entire enigma. He snapped back to the present when Lori walked into the kitchen. Thinking it over again? She asked. Trevor turned and gave that confident smile he had got used to doing. I am, he said, with a faint nod. They hugged. We just have to think of it as another day, Lori said. But it's different today. At least we'll have everyone together today and you'll get to tell them all the news. That's right, Trevor said. Today is the day. He didn't even convince himself with that answer. Dad, it will be fine, Lori said with her usual happy tone. Today is the first day of the rest of your life. It's time you stopped existed and started living. Imagine if she did come back today, she would smack you for wasting time. Trevor laughed. You sound like her more than you'll ever know. He put his head on her shoulder. Trevor tried to change the subject. Has Mike organized everything for today? The food, the drinks? He asked. Yes, it is all organized. It will be here by 11. Lori said. Mike will be in shortly, he was just on the phone signing a deal. I'll go and start setting up. Trevor watched Lori walk out of the kitchen. He knew that today was going to be difficult, but he would make it. He knew he always had his family's support, especially on the anniversary. He walked through to the living room and looked around. He had cleaned the place up before everyone had arrived. It wasn't looking too bad. He looked up at the photos that lines the walls. That was his memories right there. He had a laugh at the few drunken photos of him and Molly when they were young and followed them around to their wedding, all the way to the last photos they had together, all three of them at the local zoo just weeks before Molly's death. He smiled at the memories and straightened some of the frames. The front door slammed shut and he heard Mike's trademark laugh. Well, that's another one, Trev, he said as he came in, rubbing his hands. I've signed a small independent company in Texas to work with us. That's another $12 million in the bank for us. He walked over to the small bar that Trevor had set up in the corner and poured himself a barman's measure of whiskey. Feels good, doesn't it? He clapped Trevor on the back. Trevor never saw the excitement in a new deal in the same way Mike did. Will you join me? Asked Mike. He offered the glass over. Not just yet, said Trevor. Don't worry, said Mike. There will be more chances today. He knocked the contents of the glass down his throat. That's good, Mike choked. Right, I've got it all planned for today. Caterers, bar tenders, music. Hell, after my morning all of today is on me, what do you say? Mike continued. You don't have to do that, Trevor said. He wasn't sure if Mike was even aware what day it was. He didn't want to ask him or bring his mood down. I won't hear of it, it's your day today. I think we've spent long enough in the past, said Mike. He remembers all right, thought Trevor. Okay, he said. Your treat. But I want this to be memorable. It will be, said Mike. I'll go find Lori and help set up. Are you coming? The phone began to ring. I'll be along in a second, I'll just take this call, said Trevor. He went back into the kitchen and answered the phone. Hello? He asked. Trevor? It's Dr. Harris here. Hi. There, doctor. What can I do for you? Said Trevor. Big day for you today, isn't it? The doctor said. Is it a good time to talk? No talk away, replied Trevor. I just wanted to confirm that we have your new treatment regime ready for you along with the new drugs too. Try. Obviously they won't cure you, but they will certainly prolong your life, and we'll do everything we can to make you as comfortable as possible. Is there a chance we can meet in the next Few days to discuss it further? Dr. Harris said. Yes, of course. After today is out of the way, we'll be able to meet any time, said Trevor. Thank you. Have you told your family yet about this? The doctor asked. No, doctor, said Trevor. Let me tell them I am retiring and selling my family home first, before I tell them that I'm dying. Understood, said Dr. Harris. I'll see you in a few days then. Thanks, doctor. I'll be in touch. Trevor put down the phone. He took another deep breath. Let's get the important bit over first, he thought. We'll get today over, then I'll face all of this. Chapter 2. A few hours after Trevor's phone call, the guests had started to arrive. There were so many of his family he hadn't seen for a long time. It was a crime, really, he thought as he met his great-niece Lucy for the first time in nearly 20 years. Trevor tried his hardest to keep happy, but he could tell deep down that everyone would still be tiptoeing around him, even after all this time. No one ever mentioned their wives or their family. Trevor always thought it was strange, but he knew it was their way of trying to avoid the subject. He took one of those trademark deep breaths and smiles. Christ, he thought. It must looked so forced. But he powered through. Out he walked into the garden and looked around. He was trying to find someone he could speak to for a while that wouldn't be an effort. But he really knew that it wouldn't be a super fun, happy slide day. It would be so difficult for him, but he tried his best to be strong. Something that he was so used to doing by this stage. He started by walking around the garden. He saw a few familiar faces that he tried his best to avoid. He got a glass of wine from the makeshift bar that was in the middle of the marquee. That's when the family caught up with him. Well, the voice said. I haven't seen you for years. Trevor turned around and saw him. It was Uncle Arthur. He wasn't his uncle but Molly's. He was just about her only surviving relative, aside from her brother. How are you, Arthur? Asked Trevor. He was instantly regretting the entire party. I'm good, Trev, said Arthur. He was obviously on his 7th or 8th glass of whiskey by this point. Terrible, just terrible, said Arthur. I still can't bloody believe it. 30 years and we still haven't got anything. He was still shaking Trevor's hand. He was one of those that refused to let go, even though the introduction was over about half an hour ago. I always hoped I would get an answer to what happened to her before I went, Arthur said. But I don't think I ever will. The handshake continued. Trevor had realized over the years that a simple sincere look and vague smile would be enough to get him past even the most difficult relative. Trevor tried his best to ignore what Arthur was saying. He was looking for someone else to come and save him. But just as he was planning to run away, he saw Mike walking towards him. Thank Christ, he thought. Trevor, can I borrow you for a second? Mike asked. Yes, please. Trevor thought. What can I help you with? Trevor asked. I want you to come and meet with someone, said Mike. Trevor said his goodbyes to Uncle Arthur and ran off. Who is it? He asked. You'll never believe it. The former owner of the company from Texas we've merged with is in town on business and I only managed to get him to come over. Come in. Meet him. There was so much excitement in Mike's voice. He was like a kid on Christmas Day. Trevor followed Mike, wishing he had taken the time to top up his drink first before he had gone to meet the new business associates. But he made do. Mike introduced him to one of the most stereotypical oilmen Trevor had ever seen in his life. If Junior Ewing and Donald Trump ever had a love child, this was him. Trevor, I'd like you to meet Chuck and Linda Stone of Stone Oil in Texas. They will be working a great deal with us over the next little while. Pleasure to meet you both. Trevor lied while shaking their hands. It is so kind of you to visit while you were in town. We couldn't turn down Trevor, Chuck said. We just had to come and meet the brains behind the Hayden Oil and Enterprises operation. I'm hardly the brains, said Trevor. Mike has done most of the hard work over the last 30 years and it was my wife's company before that. He paused. I suppose it still is. He felt that sadness hit him again. Well, I look forward to working with you, said Chuck. So what is this party for today? Exactly? A birthday? He asked. No, said Trevor. I've got a fairly major announcement to make to everyone later on. But I needed everyone here to hear it. Well, I look forward to hearing that. Trevor. However exciting, said Chuck. Trevor wasn't sure if he was being sarcastic or not. They parted company and Trevor made his way back to the bar. He was getting a bit nervous about making the announcement. He decided he would have another drink at the bar. He went over and poured a drink. He looked around at all his family and friends. He always thought it was such a pleasure to have everyone there. He just wished he could enjoy it more and wished that Molly could have been there to enjoy it too. He and Molly used to have a big family party every year. Everyone would get together and just have a great time. He missed those carefree days. Trevor wished he could get over the grief, but it was still raw. His was the worst sort of grief imaginable. There was never a full stop on it, nor did he ever find a place to store it in his heart. He went from day to day in a constant state of upset as if Molly had just disappeared the night before. The party was in full swing and the drinks were flowing. Trevor had done quite well in avoiding quite a lot of people. He had even managed to escape inside and watch the celebrations from the kitchen for a while. But he couldn't avoid it for much longer. He had to make his announcement. He walked out of the house and into the middle of the garden and grabbed the microphone. It was now or never. Ladies and gentlemen, family and friends. Thank you very much for coming along to be with me today on what is a very important time in my life. For the last 30 years Mike and I have worked tirelessly to keep Hayden Oil and Enterprises going. We've struggled and we've fought, but words cannot describe how happy I am at how it has all worked out. Today is also a very difficult day for all the family as it has been exactly 30 years since our beloved Molly disappeared. I have spent those years in and out of very dark spells. But I have had all of you around me to look after me and support me. I'll never be able to thank you all enough for that. But after a lot of soul-searching, backtracking and multiple changes of mind, I have come to what I believe is a very difficult but important decision. I have had an estate agent view and estimate this house, my family home where we shared our memories and life with Molly, and as of tomorrow the house will be up for sale and in due course I will be moving to a new home. Elsewhere I have also decided that it is time for me to retire from the company. So, in due course I will be drawing up the paperwork and handing my shares and interests over to my dear brother-in-law, Mike. So today I have brought you all here to help me celebrate my new beginnings. It is time to stop living in the past and welcome in the new. So have a drink, have some more food and dance the night away. Thank you. Trevor was nearly brought to tears with everyone's kindness. They all wanted to come over and speak to him about his plans and what his future would hold. Although he could see that everyone was happy for him, he couldn't really enjoy it, not with the other news he had lingering over him. As the party continued, he spent the evening speaking away to everyone that wanted to share in his news. He even had one or two people seem interested in buying the house. He couldn't see why. I needed a facelift quite badly. As the midsummer August sun began to set in the sky, some of the guests began to get ready to leave. Trevor was beginning to feel quite tired. He would often get out of breath quite easily. He sat down with his drink and watched the last of the guests enjoy themselves. As Trevor was getting ready to retreat inside again, he was stopped in his tracks by Chuck and Linda Stone. "Oh God. Not again," he thought as they stumbled over towards him, obviously having had their fair share of the free bar. "Trev," Chuck shouted. "Congratulations on your retirement. I wish it to be a long and happy one for you." They shook hands once again. "I'm just sorry," Linda began, "on hearing about your wife. That was such a tragedy. Mike told us all about it. But I just had to come and tell you something." "Oh yes?" said Trevor. "Well, it's just," she hesitated. "It's just story of your wife's accident just sounded so familiar to me. It was all over the news at the time. You must have heard it there." He said. "I'm sure I did," she said, but she was interrupted by Mike coming over. "Listen to this, Mike," said Trevor. Linda continued. "I might be going on here a bit, but my ex-husband was a plastic surgeon and he used to operate out of his surgery in Bodega Bay on the California coast. Around 30 years ago, he dealt with the case of a woman who had been severely injured in a car accident here in England. She was in a right state when she first came to her. She was almost bandaged from head to toe." "Come on, Trevor, we don't need to hear this," said Mike. "No, I want to hear it all," Trevor said. "Carry on, Linda. Anyway, my husband did everything he could for the woman. She called herself Margaret. But once she began to recover, she spoke about her family and spoke about the accident. Her car went over the cliff and exploded on impact, and she didn't remember anything else until arriving with us," she said. "I know it was long ago, but did she ever tell you what color car she was driving?" Trevor asked. He was holding his breath. "It was a silver BMW as far as I can remember," Linda said. "Oh my God, Mike," Trevor said. "I think that was Molly. But how did she end up in California? What happened to her?" There were 1,000 more questions Trevor had for them. He just couldn't get them all out at one time. "Right, I think we've heard enough of all this," said Mike. "I think you should both leave for now." "No, please," said Trevor. "Mike, this is the first lead we've had in 30 years. We have to know more. What happened to the lady? Where did she go after she left your husband?" "Well, that's the strange bit," said Linda. "This Margaret lady arrived one day out of the blue. She was referred to us with very little information, and once she stabilized and my husband performed a lot of surgery on her, he went in one day and she was gone. Absolutely no sign that she had ever been there." Trevor was in shock. He didn't know what to do first. "Are you still in contact with your ex-husband?" he asked. "No, I'm afraid not," said Linda. "We haven't spoken for years." "Is there any way we can get in touch with him?" Trevor asked. "That isn't a good idea, Trev," said Mike. "We really shouldn't be doing this." Trevor ignored him. "He was still working in Bodega Bay the last I heard. I'm sure you'll be able to look him up online and get in touch. If you say I told you to get in touch, he will definitely talk to you. Look for Dr. Harry Gordon," Linda said. "Thank you so much," said Trevor. He hugged them both. Chuck and Linda joined the rest of the guests. Leaving the party, Trevor grabbed another drink. For the first time in 30 years, he was excited. He had a glimmer of hope. "Mike, we have to get in touch with this Dr. Gordon. He might be able to give us a lead," he said. "I really don't think we should. It will be another disappointment for us all if it comes back as just a mere coincidence," said Mike. "But just think about it. Silver BMW crashed off a cliff here in England. It all fits together." Mike: "I think that was Molly. If it was, she could still be alive out there somewhere." Mike was really reluctant to get involved, but he could see that nothing he could say would deter Trevor from searching. "Okay," said Mike. "Call the doctor in the morning and see if we can get anything from him. We'll take it from there," he said. Trevor smiled. For once it was an actual, real smile. He was exhausted and decided that he would try and get a few hours rest before contacting Dr. Gordon. He was about to begin a mission to find out what happened to his wife, and this time Trevor was determined to get some answers, regardless of what he had to do to get them. Chapter 3. It was before dawn the next morning that Trevor awoke and began to research Drive Gordon. A quick internet search found him almost right away, and to Trevor's surprise he found he was still working and operating from Bodega Bay. There was a simple email address listed on the site to make appointments to meet with him. Trevor decided to send an email. He wasn't sure how Dr. Gordon would react to such a request, so he decided to word it as carefully as possible. He really thought he was going mad. "Dear Dr. Gordon, I am seeking to speak with you about a former patient of yours. I am based in the United Kingdom and I believe you treated my wife, who has been missing for nearly 30 years now." How stupid, Trevor thought. He will never reply to that, but he had to try. "If we can get a chance to speak with you about this, please contact me on 07. It might be the answer he had been waiting for all these years, but he found himself hesitating before he clicked send. But he did anyway. He didn't want to just sit and wait, but looking at the time, it was a little after 5. He knew that he couldn't call Dr. Gordon. It would be the middle of the night there. Instead, he decided to wait until he knew there had been enough time for a response. He knew there would be no point sitting in front of his computer all day. That would be torture. But he couldn't help but try and do a bit of research on this Dr. Gordon. Putting his name into a search engine, he once again found the page for his still active surgery. A quick scroll down found that he was once the surgeon the stars so many famous names had been through his surgery over the years. He had even found out that Harry and Linda's marriage had failed due to her infidelity. But that was about it. Nothing else. He even searched for the doctor alongside Molly, but it didn't give anything of use back. Just one of those, "Did you mean?" suggestions. After a while of searching, he decided to try and distract himself by having his morning coffee. He walked into the kitchen, which was still a mess from the previous evening's party. He knew he would have to spend hours tidying up before the house went on the market. He couldn't face having people coming to view his home in that sat. Trevor once again had gone into a world of his own, so much so that he hadn't noticed Lori walking into the kitchen and sitting down beside him. "Still thinking everything over?" she asked him. He hadn't told her about the chance meeting he had had with Linda Stone on the previous evening. Lori was his only daughter. There was no point hiding it from her. She could read him like a book. "Something happened last night," he began. He could see the look of worry come over her face right away. "It's fairly big," he said. What happened, Dad? She asked him. She sounded concerned. Trevor never was one for being able to sit still. He was always better off at fidgeting and pacing. He got up from his chair. I spoke with a lady last night, one of your Uncle Mike's new clients. She told me about her ex-husband who was a plastic surgeon. He could tell Lori was getting lost in where the conversation might be going. I think that man, a Dr. Gordon, treated your mother after the accident. Lori looked at him in total silence. She was trying to take it all in. I know it sounds insane, but Linda remembers that the woman came to her husband's surgery after a bad accident around here when her car went over a cliff. She was able to tell me the car your mum was driving that night and everything. Trevor looked at her, hoping to get some sort of response. Lori shook her head in disbelief. This is too much to take in at any time, never mind so early. In the morning, she began. Do you think this woman is onto something, or is she just trying to get on the bandwagon? I don't know, said Trevor. But I've got in touch with Dr. Gordon. I'm just waiting for him to reply. Have you heard anything back yet? Lori asked. Hopefully. Trevor looked at his phone. Not yet. I'll wait a little while and then I will give him a call. As soon as you hear anything, I want to know, said Lori. This could be the breakthrough we've been waiting for. Trevor nodded. Anyway, I need to get this place cleaned up. As of today, this old house is on the market. It has to look respectable. Lori just chuckled as Trevor picked up the first of what was to be many bin liners of the morning. As lunchtime approached, Trevor had tried everything he could to avoid looking at his phone. He wanted to know everything, but at the same time he didn't. He didn't expect Dr. Gordon to simply agree to tell him everything. Hell, even if he could, it had been 30 years ago. Trevor could barely remember what he had done last week, never mind who he had spoke to 30 years back. During the morning he had completely overhauled the house. In fact, he had cleared out so much rubbish from the small house that he was surprised that there was anything left. Anything of value anyway. He stopped and sat in his living room, watching the passers-by go about their daily lives. For one short moment he even forgot all of us troubles until one of those terrible coughing fits overtook him. He was trying to catch his breath and walked back into the kitchen for a glass of water. That was the one thing he hated about the whole illness, the uncontrollable coughing. He could be fine for days at a time, but out of nowhere it would just surprise him and nearly take him off of his feet. For a few moments he stood over the sink, trying to catch his breath. His eyes were streaming with water. After a few steady breaths he regained control. Thank God, he thought. He refilled his glass from the tap and sat back down at the kitchen table. His phone lit up. Message, he said as he grabbed at his phone, still trying to see through the tears. Who had messaged him? He was quickly disappointed when he realized it was from his mobile provider. He was just about to slam his phone down in a rage when he noticed he had an email notification. He didn't dare get his hopes up, but he opened the application anyway and looked. Dr. Gordon had replied. His thumb hovered over the email for a few seconds. He was ready to be let down. Another false lead, he thought. He opened it and read, Dear Trevor, while I cannot give out personal information about previous cases over the phone or by email, I will happily meet you at your earliest possible convenience as your case involves a missing person. Please get in touch with my secretary who will arrange the necessary appointments. Yours, H. Gordon MD. Trevor had to reread the email 2 or 3 times to just make sure he wasn't dreaming. It wasn't much, but it was a start. He hadn't been told to go away, nor had he been denied access to meeting Dr. Gordon. In fact, for the first time ever, he had something. With much excitement he called Mike to begin Making plans to visit Bodega Bay? Absolutely not. Mike sounded angry. Why should we travel to the other side of the world just to meet with someone who won't be able to tell us a damned thing? Mike, we have to. For Molly. This could be our last chance to try and find her. Why are you so against this? Trevor asked. He could feel that lump in his throat. Return. Lori was holding Trevor's hand tightly. She really believed in him and wanted him to go. I just think you are making a big mistake. You'll come back here in a few days, heartbroken. Because once again we came back with nothing. Mike just wasn't buying into it at all. He continued, or worse, we'll get there and he'll want to extort all sorts of cash just to tell you that he has no record of her. Trevor found himself getting incredibly annoyed. Mike, I'm not asking for your permission. I'm simply telling you that I am going to California to follow this lead. If you don't want to come along, fine. But I am going and that is final. Mike thought it over. He was sweating through his emotions. I'll come with you, he said. But, under the condition that as soon as he starts talking money and all sorts we go. Fine, said Trevor. Deep down he knew no matter what it took he would be leaving there with some sort of information. Mike, I love her to the moon and back. If I have to travel the world 1,000 times over for her I will. Trevor looked at him. Me too, Trev. Me too. We'll go and do this, he said. For her. Dad, what do you want me to do? Will I come with you? Lori asked. No. Lori, you stay here. We might need you to arrange bookings and things like that once we are over there. You might even have to come and rescue us if this man turns out to be a psycho. They all laughed. Okay, Lori said. I can get you a flight from London into California that leaves at 7 p.m. tonight. Would that be enough time? Both men nodded. I can also get a car to pick you up from the airport and take you into Bodega Bay itself. She finished. Good girl, said Trevor. We better get packing. Lori wasn't the first to notice her father's excitement. Although he had planned to retire and let himself have some peace, he was ready for this investigation. Maybe it'll be good for him? Lori said. I'm sure it will, said Mike. I hope so anyway. It had been such an eventful day already and Trevor's tiredness didn't deter his enthusiasm to get on that flight and meet with Dr. Gordon. He was ready for some answers.